Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, the third in our Build by Our Partner series, How Innovation Will Make the Smart Home Smarter, a conversation between Rob Martens, SVP, Chief Innovation and Design Officer at Allegion and President of Allegion Ventures, Cory Sorice, SVP and Chief Innovation Officer at Masonite International, and Scott Harkins, Vice President Sales and Marketing at Residio, and moderated by Dave Knox, author of Predicting the Term. My name is Stu Willson. I'm the CEO of Radicle. And before I hand it off to Dave and our panelists, a bit on why we're here. As I've noted many times, investing in the future has never been more important, but doing it effectively is really hard. And with this series, we want to share perspectives and best practices from those on the forefront of enterprise innovation. Who are we? We are a research and insights business that helps the world's leading companies, customers like Nestle and Silicon Valley Bank, IKEA and Eli Lilly, and many others, make faster and better informed investments in the future by identifying and uncovering the latent expertise, domain experience, and insights of people on the forefront of new markets. Our next webinar in this series will be focused on corporate venture capital with our friends from Touchdown Ventures, and will be in mid-June. We're excited to have Dave Knox moderate a session on the smart home. And with that, Dave, I will hand it off to you.
Always appreciate, Stu. Welcome to everybody. It's going to be great to be here. You're not here to listen to me, though. You're here to listen to our great panelists. So I want to dive right in with having each briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of dive into the questions. So Rob, why don't we start with you?
Sure. My name is Rob Martens. So I help to facilitate innovation and design at Allegion. I'm also responsible for the venture fund. Allegion is a pure play security company. We make, I guess you could call us a tech-enabled manufacturer. We make a lot of the brands you might be familiar with, even though you might not be familiar with the Allegion name itself. Schlage, Kryptonite, Von Dupper, and LCN. In terms of the smart home, most people know us through our premium residential brand name of Schlage. And I'm no Cory Sorice, but I'll do my best to add value today.
You aren't.
I thought Cory was going to introduce himself, and he just wanted to make one side comment. So
I can go next if you'd like. I'm Cory Sorice, Chief Innovation Officer at Masonite. If you want to check titles, I actually was first. Rob was second in that title, and he threw in a little derivative just to kind of be spicy, like kind of the 2.0 version, which may not have been as good as the original. But that said, I've spent probably about 20 years around the connected home. 10 years, most recently at Chamberlain, working on the MyQ platform. Came to Masonite almost 2 years ago now. We recently announced a powered and connected exterior door system, and are starting to move the company into connected home and IoT applications. So of the three of us, I would say our products are probably the furthest away from the smart home and moving towards it. So I'm real excited to be here. As we've said on LinkedIn a bit, Scott and Rob are really a couple of folks I rely on quite heavily for their insights and their experience. They do a great job in the space. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Scott?
Yeah, hi, Dave. Scott Harkins here. I lead the sales and parts of the marketing organization for Residio. Quick intro to Residio. We're a spinoff of Honeywell from about just over 2.5 years ago, where we're market leaders in home security systems, HVAC systems, and in particular, many know of us as a thermostat company. And then what I term the behind the wall things that make the house operate properly. So we're a leader in the smarts that go into hot water heaters, or maybe they're just water heaters, replacement parts for air conditioning, furnaces, things that create the flame. So we do a lot of things that make your house warm, comfortable, safe, secure. We've been doing it for a pretty long time. I've been in this space pretty much my whole life. First half of my career was more security focused. Second half of my career, maybe not quite half, has been really dedicated to the connected world, right? So I helped Honeywell, pre-Residio, develop their connected home strategies, which is where I've stumbled upon both Cory and Rob, amongst others, across the industry at the really early beginnings of what a connected home might be able to do a few years ago. So glad to be here and love being on the panel.
So I want to take that comment you just made, Scott. You used the term connected home, and then we have heard others say smart home. How do you define connected home versus smart home, and what makes it smart or connected at a high level?
So that's a good question. I don't like any of the terms, to be honest with you. I mean, the home is just the home. When I think about, in my garage outside here, I have a Jeep. I drive a Jeep, and I don't think of it as a smart car, and yet it's got every kind of technology you can imagine. It has locks that unlock as I approach it. It's got cameras all over it. It's got sensors that tell me if I'm in the middle of my lane or not. If my air pressure goes down, it lets me know that my air is down. But I don't call it a smart car. I think the home has to evolve to that. So when I say connected, I mean making the home and the way you live in your home a little bit more like the way you live your life. When you live your life, you're connected. You have maybe a watch on that's tracking your heart rate, and you know how many steps you took. When you're at work, you're never too far away from the latest message or the latest forecast. When you're flying, hopefully one day we'll fly again. When we're flying, your airplane is pumping data back down to the field. The car, as I said, when your tires are going flat, it tells you. But when you walk in the front door of your home, right, we manage our home by like catastrophe. Water leaks, we submit insurance claims. Air conditioners fail, and we spend $17,000 to replace them. So when I think smart home, even though I don't like the term or connected home, I think smart are the things that help you operate your home without you having to think about it. I no longer have to think about whether there's a car next to me. I always look because my vehicle tells me there's a car in the lane next to me. I should know if my water heater is not heating water or is leaking. I should know if my air conditioner is about to fail well before I have a catastrophic failure. And we do that by combining, right, thermostats and security systems and locks and doors and windows into like one big operational seamless system that takes like the mundane life about living in your home and having to worry about things, just makes you not worry about them. Forget about the home warranty or the rider on your insurance to pay for all your failures, and let your house manage your failures for you and help you avoid them, just like everything else in your life.
Love it. Anything to add, Cory or Rob?
I think Scott nails it so well. I mean, I think we would all kind of agree with the sentiments. I would maybe put an adjacent comment to that, which says, we're kind of, all of us are different and we have our own preferences. So what we're really starting to talk about is an active versus passive home. So using Scott's definition, which I completely agree with, is hey, you can have things that are smart that are not connected. And you can have things that are connected that a lot of us would say are crap and they're not very smart. But one thing that I think we could all agree on is when you start to look at the devices that you put in your home, some people want for those things to just kind of set it and forget it, to use that, kind of phrase. Some of those non-sexy things that Scott describes are some of the absolutely most important elements in your home. But you have a competition going on between those kind of set it and forget it things and other products that want to have an active interaction with you, such as voice assistants or other things when you're, actively commanding your home. And so I think where we're headed towards, and, the three of us have dealt with it for years, is what does your home operating system look like? And I think that as interoperability and the barriers to having things that should work together drop, it's going to be more and more of a choice of, hey, which kind of operating system do you prefer? Is it passive or is it active?
Yeah, I'd build on that, Rob. I think that's right. The connected story, as we've all lived through it, the getting connected piece of the equation, I think homeowners are going to get more choices and facilities, and it's going to get easier, right? There's going to be kind of verticals of technology stacks that'll be options that'll be able to be attached to. And the smart part, being in access for a long time, like this active passive thing, I think is really important. We're really worried about opening a door or even closing a door from the machine, so to speak. Like, when will we authorize a cloud-enabled activity on behalf of a user, right? A smart activity. Connecting a device, right? You taking an action yourself for yourself with a device is one thing. Moving it to smart, actually, or thoughtful, or whatever you want to say, has a lot more connotations, cost of failure, right? Like, you have to know a lot more about how the system operates and what people expect. And that's probably an escalation process of having enough data to know what matters, and then moving to being able to get that right, because acting in ways from the system or the device that are not what you intended actually does the opposite, right? It moves a smart device to dumb really quick. A connected device, it's you can miss the connectivity part and you disappoint people, but you miss the smart part and you really piss people off. So it's that connotation's an interesting one as we move forward as an industry to try to solve that, especially across devices or in kind of in a coordinated way over time.
Yeah, and I just, my final thought on it is we so often think about the smart home or the connected home in the early stages of its development as things that are fun and cool and more novelty. So the cool lights that I can change via an app and change the colors of, maybe the bar in my basement, a cool way to unlock a door, a cool way to just interface with something on an app when maybe that is connected. I think, Cory, maybe that was your point, but the smartness is when these things, right, the devices, the products within your home actually help you live your life better, right? So they prevent you from wasting a lot of money. Maybe they save you a lot of costs on your energy. Maybe, they protect your family in a way that wasn't possible before. And, so the innovation, I believe, that has to take place has to be about taking this connected piece, these singular devices, and making them part of a smart solution. And again, not a giant fan of either connected home or smart home. I know they're the names that we get to deal with, but I think we have some cool things that the home can do to really make the way people's lives lives in their home equal how they live outside of their home.
So taking that thread a little bit further then, when you think about the overriding, let's call it job to be done, or the hierarchy of needs, when it comes to governing this innovation, how do you prioritize those and think about them to bring some of those elements you just kind of mentioned?
I'll jump in and start. I think Scott and Cory both hit on something, which is, all three companies that you have represented here have spent, a considerable amount of time in their space. And so, for example, in particular, Scott and mine, we've been making locks for 100 years. It's not just a calling card to say, hey, we have figured out how to monetize this well or something like that. It also is because there's something specific and important about the way your technology, whether it's mechanically oriented or electronically oriented, is implemented in the home. And so, when we start talking about, pick your term, about the new home, how these things are implemented really matters when you start to apply incremental artificial intelligence or other types of learning around it. One of our brands that we're very proud of, which is one of our newer brands, is a company called Yonomi. And within Yonomi, we can automate the recognition of smart home objects, and then we can make recommendations in terms of routines or recipes or robots, or what old farts like me would call, workflow. So in doing so, both Cory and Scott could give you a million different stories, and I hope they'll give a couple of examples here of where, if you did not understand how to properly implement that device, which you may think of as a gadget, but Schlage, for example, looks at it as a life safety device, or something else, you could inadvertently put yourself and your family in harm's way. And so breaking out of this mentality, this kind of, hey, this is cool and kind of gadgety thing towards long-term meaningful value. So this is an incremental asset to the core infrastructure of your home, is a critical step that I think we're making right now. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this some more, Dave, but in order to do that, you have to take down some proprietary boundaries that make it very difficult for people to understand how to let these parts and pieces work together. Let me throw it to Scott and Cory from there.
Yeah, so I'll say, if I understood the question, I'd say in terms of hierarchy needs, first of all, a homeowner purchases a product typically from us via the professional channel, so a contractor or a security dealer. Job number one of that product is it has to do what it's supposed to do. So the thermostat actually has to make sure that you're comfortable in your home and maybe save you some money when you're not there. Security system is supposed to alert you when something happens that shouldn't be happening or a fire goes off. So job one in the hierarchy is the product that is hired by that homeowner has to do what it's designed to do. Job two is if I can get it connected, right, via Wi-Fi or another means, I might be able to unlock some new value via just remote connectivity via an app. Job number three becomes how can I bring more value outside of what that product is designed for? So my thermostat is designed to keep comfort in my home. What else can I do with that thermostat that might drive value? So I can save energy a couple of different ways, right? I can tell you when it's time to replace your air filter. Dirty air filters make your systems run much longer. You end up spending a lot more money. I can take that same thermostat and enroll you in utility demand response and energy efficiency programs that can save a bunch of money. And then maybe the fourth one is like when I go a step further and say, okay, this isn't necessarily in Residio's in our directly within our roles and responsibility, but how do I work with Rob and his locks to make that experience better and different? How do I work with companies that make water heaters that might happen to use our technology on those water heaters to make those experiences a little bit different and build out that third rail is the kind of the ecosystem and make these things, they do what they're supposed to do effectively. They do their job that they're hired to do. They bring some value because they're connected and they give the homeowner some new opportunities. Maybe they save some money or increase peace of mind. And then, as you get out to this so-called smart home, that's the bigger ecosystem that unlocks, when we get there, right? When it's really working, that's, I think, where the real value comes, where I can predict failures and eliminate them. I can predict a leak in the home. I can predict if a door lock or a door is about to fail. I can predict things and help the homeowner not worry about the kind of the mundane tasks of how the home operates.
I'll tell you the other piece that I found just fascinating. When I took the job at Masonite, a company that makes 34 million doors a year, and really a leader in interior, exterior doors in North America, does a lot in the commercial space as well. I came in and talked to a whole bunch of people in the industry, and they were like, "Man, you got to go talk to this company." And we ended up talking to this company, and they make an electromechanical control that listens for smoke detectors to close your bedroom door. They give you extra time. It alleviates the ability. It actually diminishes the ability for smoke and fire to be able to pass through a house. And you think about these static things in your house, right? The way they've always existed, and then you start to think about how IoT and connected home and technology actually can come in and be a benefit, a value add or a contributor. The way Scott talked about it. What can it do that it has already done? What can it do in a more automated way? What can it do and then with the data you have in a connected home scenario where it can add value to other parts of the home? When you zoom out from a use case standpoint, that's what you get. You get things like what we call Minder, a product that actually can be added to your door, can listen to a smoke detector and then react on your behalf, right? And there's a lot of those use cases around the house and around an office and a commercial facility. And as I think business leaders, what we have to think about around IoT is those use case attributes. I think Scott said it really well. Is these become like little data cubes, right? And they also become like little form functions of functionality that can start to act in a more autonomous way over time. And it takes a bit of imagination, but then also I think that's not just related to the product. It's also the way you start to map your relationships across the industry. And I know that's why these guys come in to do these things. That's why I do it too. I'm always interested in talking to folks about ways to improve our products and to work across a number of different categories to make that work, because you're never really going to always see that at the front end. Sometimes you have to kind of think through what the use case and the benefit case is. But I think thermostats is one of the prime examples of thinking about it as an energy management platform and not just comfort. And you pair those two together, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of new industry participants that want to play and they want to help, and there's some value created. So I think there's a number of those different kinds of situations that we all get to kind of bring to life and think about if we are creative, being thinking about the end users and kind of constituents in the process.
So thinking about then, when we look at the technology changes that are constantly kind of occurring across the board, which ones are you most excited about for what they open up for the smart home in the years to come?
It's so funny. I think about what is not the case, and then I think about what's the case. So 12 years ago at Chamberlain, we had to stand up almost like a soup can and two soup cans in a string, like how to build an IoT platform. And I'll tell you, doing that at Masonite, there are so many packaged platforms, capabilities, technologies, partners. What Rob has with Unomi is a great example of that. There are a lot of different organizations now available to be able to build out technology platforms, and I think the cost of the core technologies on the hardware side have come way down. The tool sets to communicate are easier. I would say that the part of the equation that's getting still getting refined, but is getting better is the designer, the industrial designer, UX designer, UI designer, that class of person coming out of college, I think is probably an area that is really interesting now, because user journeys are really different, right? It's different to think about a use case and a user journey for a door. You open it and you close it. But when you start to think about delivery and pets and guests and homeowners, the user journey mapping for that is super different. And there's human factors, and there's multiple actors, and there's a whole bunch of use case scenarios, and there's a whole bunch of fail cases. So, as a door company, we have to then think about, what does design look like when we think about designing for how people live in their homes related to security and guests, and there's a whole bunch of other partners that we need to work with, and how do we enable those experiences? So the underlying technology piece, I think, is starting to get to the cost and complexity level that we can start to enable a lot more than we could have 10 years ago. It's not easy, but I would say, the ramping up phase at Masonite has been much faster and much cheaper than what I would have said 10 years ago at Chamberlain.
Yeah, so I would add a couple of things here. So I think, and we'll see how this develops over time, but edge compute, I like the edge compute piece versus everything going to the cloud to make key decisions, if for no other reason than just some of the propagation delay that takes place. But I think edge compute has an opportunity to change the way these products all work and talk together. 5G is a popular answer. I'm not sure I really understand if 5G will change a lot in the home as it is. If it someday becomes a competitor to broadband, maybe, but that's probably well down the road yet. Standards, right? So that, what I make, what Rob makes, what Cory makes, what other people make actually can work together without the consumer having to understand cloud to cloud integrations or other unusual technology terms that most consumers don't know nor care to know about. And then I would think the last thing, which I think is where you really unlock true value, is alternate monitoring. So right in my security world, the value of security is I can monitor the alarm system, right? And people will pay to a security dealer, my customer base, a recurring revenue to do that monitoring. I believe the entire home should be monitored. I believe that the water heater, I know I'm repeating myself, the furnace, the locks, the lighting, the outlets, the wires, all can be monitored with technologies that exist today. And then that data that gets collected can be sent out to a monitoring center, whether that's a security dealer, maybe it's an HVAC contractor, maybe it's somebody else. You know, I don't know yet, but I think that's where you unlock the real value. If I can save, if I can predict the failure of your air conditioning unit, I can save you thousands and thousands of dollars. You might have to pay a few $100s for a service call, but you know, a replacement of air conditioning can be quite expensive. If I can keep a leak from becoming a major loss, where it's an insurance claim, I think it's a significant savings. So, and by the way, it pulls in other constituents. So now that's important to the insurance company. It's important to the contractor. It's important to the homeowner. So I think if there was a way to somehow standardize how that data gets collected and presented at some kind of monitoring center, it can really begin to unlock the smarts in the home.
I don't mean to be repetitive, but I think that, you know, Cory and Scott both nailed the ones that I'm most excited about. You know, one is obviously the edge computing has been the mega trend that I'm very much interested in. And if you look at Cory's business and Scott's business and my business, you can really break it down to a term that we use at Allegion called our unique geography. And so understanding what your unique geography is helps you to determine how you strategically partner within the space. And so, you know, for example, you know, the people that make these, you know, that make these phones and things, they have lots of value that they can bring, but they're limited in the sense that, you know, they might not have power running directly to it, or they might have a number of other, you know, elements that are limiting them. The second piece outside of edge computing to me that is, you know, really exciting is what Cory described in terms of the breakthrough and advancement in terms of UI, UX options, and in terms of really tremendous design improvements are all there, whether you're a, you know, augmented reality fan or something else, your opportunities are going to grow and grow and grow. The one thing I would add to those two, though, is this is all completely dependent on companies like ours making commitments to do things in as open a fashion as we can, to try and sell on value rather than proprietary stickiness. And I think that that's a little bit of a challenge as people are judged based on their annual, you know, recurring revenue models and other things like this. It's very tempting at times to do things that just say, hey, look, if you're going to buy this piece, it's faster for me to develop, so it's going to work with this same label, same piece, and it's going to be proprietary to others. I think if you really look at the value that you generate and the stickiness over time, you'll find you're going to do much better when you're selling based on value rather than kind of these proprietary elements plus. So I think that in and of itself, whether it's chip consortium or whatever, you know, it is that's coming forward, I think that core infrastructure and awareness that, hey, you know, we can all sell on value and generate more benefit for people all at the same time. You can have your cake and eat it too. You just need to have a plan. And I think that's my, you know, third, you know, kind of very exciting thing that, you know, is happening.
So I want to dig in on that kind of industry collaboration a little bit more. Because, you know, Rob, you mentioned the, you know, proprietary boundaries that kind of exist. And Scott, you mentioned the need for standardization. Whenever you're in the early phases of an industry, that collaboration is vitally important, but it goes against some companies' very nature to do that. How have you driven that kind of collaboration to not say this is a winner take all, but it's about really growing this industry as a whole?
Yeah, I'll just speak on behalf of Residio. So number one, like we have been at the forefront of standards for a very long time. So We're a board member of Zigbee. You know, we're one of the drivers behind, you know, we're a big Z-Wave player. We are deeply embedded in the standards community to try and drive that. Not only that, but the reason Robin, I and Cory and I know each other so well is because we've also collaborated behind the scenes for many years now, along with a lot of others, not just the three of us, on how best to drive these integrations, right? We've shared hackathons in hotels where we brought people in to try and find unique use cases. So listen, we only play in a certain part of the home, right? We do thermostats and lots of things about comfort in your home. We do security, as they said earlier, and we do some of the technology behind the home. You have to have partners. I don't sell locks. I don't sell lighting systems. I don't do doors and windows and appliances, etc. So you have to have alliances. Alliances work best when they're standardized, so there's not a ton of individual developments to make something work. Most of the smart home today, to make products work together, requires, you know, unique development or, you know, adoption of a standard. And, you know, in our security world, with the latest security product we've launched called Pro Series, you know, for the home automation piece, we've adopted Z-Wave. Rob is a fairly good sized player in the Z-Wave space, so his locks get attached to our systems and they act and operate as if they're one product. And I think we just have to keep doing those kind of things.
Boy, I get to talk on both sides of this now, which is great because, you know, I came from Chamberlain, and Chamberlain as a security access company has its own, you know, security protocol. And what I can say is important is when, you know, you're connected to millions of garage door openers, and you're the key to the house from that perspective, sharing that key broadly, right? That's the nature of open and closed is, you know, how do you link together things in a permissioned way that makes sense? In that world, I would say interoperability on a permissioned way makes a ton of sense. That may be, to your point, Scott, seamless from a user standpoint, but, you know, the companies have to interact and make that work. So there's a number of ways those topologies come together. In Masonite's example, our recently announced powered and connected exterior door system really is about powering applications at the front door of a home, and puts us in a neutral position to allow a lot of different connected home applications. In this case, you know, LED lighting, you know, video doorbells and smart locks, to be able to have those players come to us and say, hey, we're interested in participating, and then also spark the opportunity for other players to also come forward and say, hey, I'm interested because I've got another use case. And, you know, we've had some of those since the announcement, and I anticipate we'll continue to have, you know, an ecosystem of players that want to work with us to develop how those things go to market. Some of those things won't even be smart connected things. They'll just be functional benefits like lighting are. I think the way we find interoperability, my opinion is that it needs to be use case driven. There's a lot of solving for the connecting of a lot of different things. I'm not sure that that work is all valuable. If we went to a Pareto of what you do in your house and how you want things to be interact with each other, that list is pretty short. So, you know, the expectation of users isn't really that high, but man, the complexity can just, you know, you can take every device with 5 or 6 key features times 20 devices, and that's an exponential set of math that I'm sure Rob can do in his head, but I can't get my head around. So, you know, from that perspective, you know, we have to be really careful about iterating too far on benefit cases and, you know, the multiplier effect of how that looks. You know, I'm a big fan of this book called The Wide Lens. And in that book, they talk about ecosystem success. And, you know, if you take the risk of failure, it really is a multiplier across different players in an ecosystem. So if you say everybody's got a 70% chance of success and you do that times 3, right, you start to get to the point where it's 35% chance of success across 3 players, right? If we look at our history on a major technical platform for a home automation system that the 3 of us worked on, there were dozens of players involved, right? Even if all of us were at 90% chance of success, the chance of success of the ecosystem isn't 90. It's way lower than 90. So that's, I think the thing, you know, you have to do is you have to you know, decomplex the implementation, even sometimes the number of players. That's a benefit of what Residio is. Residio touches a lot of categories. So, within the enterprise, they can make a lot of choices about how they act. But I think that's how companies need to come at this is thinking more unit based and benefit case as opposed to broad from that standpoint.
If I could back up, probably about 10,000 feet.
Back it up,
Sorice. It's like you're rapping. The things that we look for within the partner community are pretty simple at this point. And what Cory does at Masonite and what Scott does at Residio are very familiar to us. And so when we talk about any kind of smart home, connected home, whatever you want to call it, device, we're looking for three core things. Number one, is it secure? Number two, is it scalable? And number three, is it simple? And you can take those three criteria and you could put that across the devices either physically or digitally. So for example, does it scale? Okay, for a lever or something or a lock that we might sell, how many times can you move the mechanical elements of that before it breaks? And then from a scale standpoint, digitally, does it behave the same way with 5,000 users that it does with 5 million? But these core elements of, these basics, and I noticed there's a question in the Q&A around privacy and other things like this. We're going to expand upon this, security, scalability, and simplicity to other things like privacy and other elements. As the mega techs that are involved that want to provide, in some cases, the overarching operating system for a home, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, signal different ways. Some monetize off of your data, and they're going to ask you to give them your data in return for a certain level of functionality that you don't have to pay for. So you're paying for it with your data. Whereas others have very strong privacy statements and are saying, listen, this is your data. And the ecosystem partners that play within our standards are going to adhere to specific criteria. So the other thing I would tell you specifically about our companies that are kind of on parade today is that we're very good at adapting our solutions to ensure that we're playing within the boundaries and the definitions of what is expected by the end consumer. And that's another big part of what makes it difficult to play in this space, because one size definitely does not fit all. When you talk about, start to talk about how are people wanting to monetize? Is it a one-time sale? Are they continuing to utilize your data? All of these different pieces, and what's the consumer willing to pay for and what are they not? To put you in a time machine, we sold our first connected lock with a subscription in 2008. And I can tell you, in our business, people do not like this, subscriptions. And so that launched a wave of innovation, Dave, for us that really attacked some of the things that Cory was talking about in terms of how do we leverage things like serverless computing and other things to ensure that we can manage our costs over time so that we don't have to charge a subscription. Schlag's never going to be the cheapest product out there, neither are either of these guys' products. But what we're going to do is we're going to manage, the expectations of our, end users. And, some things are acceptable for subscription and other things are not. And recognizing that also has a lot to do with how people, decide to monetize and integrate within the space.
So one of the things I think really interesting about the industry you guys play in is you have done such a good job at collaboration, but not every industry is like that, and they haven't necessarily been able to follow it. How have you been able to really champion the collaboration internally so you could then, collaborate externally?
So one of the things these guys taught me and a few other players in the industry, that creating use cases is a tough act within an organization. Creating use cases and benefit cases, actually the exercise of it is very similar across a company's boundary. And if done well, what you get into is the foundation of what is the benefit case for a user across an enterprise. How do you communicate that benefit case across more than one enterprise? Sharing on that, right? Like signing off on that between the enterprises, and then doing whatever contractual work you have to do to seal that deal. Moving that into the organizations becomes a real easy task when you actually know what you're going to deliver in terms of a benefit, and you've done that with a small number of folks. Like Rob, Scott, and I have definitely sat down and said, how do we want our systems to work together in our past? And I know that they've done that with other companies and are very good at it. But I think that's the hardest thing at the front end, is actually sorting through, not, hey, do we want company A and company B to work together? Because that really doesn't mean anything, right? It's really, do we want to create this experience? How do we document that in a way that makes sense to us first? And then how do we ratify that in terms of making sure the benefit is there for all the players? And as that becomes a muscle in the organization, like how do we work outside of the enterprise? No different than we work within the enterprise. What happens is those case studies become things that can be repeated over time. And some companies get real good at that, right? Like there's a whole kind of outside innovation track that allows companies to go faster, generate more profits, share those profits, and make a pie a lot bigger in that process. So it's a way better exercise to go through that, to figure out what the full ecosystem looks like, how that ecosystem manifests into a benefit case, if you can find those that create real meaningful value, then executing on them. But you've got to have folks in your organization that live that and breathe it. Because if you don't, what happens is it falls as the 11th thing on a list of 10 things to do. The piece of paper goes on a desk, nobody activates anything, and nothing gets sold. So that's at least been my experience. Yeah, I know Scott and Rob have their own.
Yeah, so I'd say it's not very hard to get to step through why collaboration is a good idea within our organization. And we tend, by the way, like there are fierce competitors in this space for all of us, right? So when we collaborate, I don't want to pretend like we collaborate across with everyone. We tend to collaborate with companies that have business models similar to us. So the pro is likely the primary channel or a significant channel to market versus, online or DIY type channels. We tend to look for companies that are play in the same channels that we play in, beyond just calling it the pro. But we think in the retail world, for example, retailers, even today, this is really what brought Cory and Rob together with me several years ago, is retailers have a hard time merchandising the connected world, right? And we thought a collaborative approach might be a different approach that they would embrace. But when I look at builders look the same way, right? Walking in as a thermostat player is different than walking in with a consortium of, Rob coined this, the adults in the room, right? Market leaders in our categories, kind of first or second across the board in our categories, and presenting solutions versus, widgets. And I think builders think about it that way more and more. I think retailers think about that more and more. And I think we have the opportunity, if you collaborate deeply, we can transform the way the pro, whether that's a HVAC contractor, maybe an electrician, a plumber, or a security dealer, I think we can transform those industries, right? And change them from heavily dependent on hardware sales to more like a security dealer, recurring revenue-based operations. And I think that requires collaboration. I'll never be able to do that as a thermostat, security water heater company. I'll need the locks and the lights and the doors and, the other parts of the home to create a solution. And that story, I think, just resonates well. Whether that's internal or external, it's a fairly easy sell.
I could give multiple examples where either Scott or Cory have pulled myself and our company into interesting opportunities that we wouldn't have seen before. So, but I think it really is cultural. I think that, if people that know me know, I usually speak in those two terms. It's like you're kind of either a missionary or you're a mercenary. And, you know, when we talk about startups for missionaries and mercenaries, it's usually like the mercenaries are the folks that are building a company to sell it. The missionaries are the Kent Dixons and the Inomis of the world who they have a vision and they want to fulfill that vision. There's nothing wrong with either one. But I think understanding culturally who you're interacting with and what is their core value-driven motivation for the company is critical in forming the right relationships. You're just going to have more consistency, especially in the examples that these guys just gave. You know, when you're walking into a big box retailer and you kind of sort of know that everybody's going to be on the same page. And I'll tell you, I mean, the three of us had circumstances where we were all on the same page and then somebody surprised us and, you know, had a very different agenda. And it's amazing how disruptive that can be. But, you know, we kind of tongue in cheek refer to ourselves as the adults in the room because we're not looking for the quick buck and the, you know, immediate, you know, revenue play. We're looking for the long-term play that makes sense and drives meaningful value over time. And I think that's how, you know, long established, you know, businesses are formed. It's, you know, there's the short-term wins that are followed by the, you know, the bigger long-term gains.
So Scott mentioned it earlier where, you know, was talking about a water leak and, you know, that can really matter for the insurance company to catch things of that early. How do you think other industries need to start thinking about the smart home now that it's moved from, you know, really something that was in its early days to being a core part of a lot of homes out there, whether that's insurance or media or pick the industry?
Yeah, so I'll kick that off. So let's talk about insurance for a minute. You know, the home now has a telematics component to it, much like your car does. So that can impact you know, actuarial tables and therefore your you know, rates, at least potentially, and not potentially. It is happening in markets around the country. So there is a play for insurance. But by the way, there's a bigger play, right? Insurance companies care about, you know, 2 or 3 things. They want to, you know, reduce the number of claims that they get. If they do get a claim, they want to reduce the size of the claim. And then thirdly, and this is probably a gross overstatement, but I'll say it anyway, that is, you know, they tend not to have the best customer relationships. So how can they improve customer relationships? Well, things like water leak detection has been proven to reduce claims, reduce the size of claims, and improve customer satisfaction. So they become at least what I call another influencer in the channel as to what should a consumer buy or how should they think about the home. I think other companies, home warranty firms have a stake in this space as well. You know, home warranty firms, I think 5% or so of homeowners have a home warranty. I'm amongst them. They, you know, they earn money and to some extent hope that nothing fails, so they don't have to spend money to do a repair. Well, maybe if they could take a better look at the equipment that's in the house, whether that's the air conditioner or the heater, maybe even a general, you know, appliance like a washing machine, they can make better decisions about the price of that home warranty and the chances of it actually failing. When I think about companies like builders, I mean, the builder position is, but you know, builders in this crazy building world or market right now. How do they sell more homes? How do they create more traffic? And the experience we're having through this year is that having smart or connected products in the home or creating smart homes around a way of us creating some coolness and some sexiness to pull people in the home. But it's also around like being environmental friendly, saving money, you know, being easier on the environment. So I think there's like 100 constituents that it's in their best interest to make the smart home smart, right? To make the connected home smart. So it's insurance, it's warranty companies, I mean, there's a long list and they all have a part to play.
I was going to go at that kind of with a theory and then kind of apply the theory in an area that we don't all touch. I don't think Rob or Scott touches these. I could be wrong. So, you know, the the general practice in connected devices is the device, right? The connectivity device. Typically, a lot of those connectivity devices have a consumable and then have, at the highest level of service, right? So pro security system is a good example. Scott's talked about a couple of times, right? The device, right? The consumable, the device, and then the service. What's interesting, I think, I can just show like, dogs as an example. Like if you connect a dog, right? A dog can be connected for data and activity, right? You can go up to the consumable. Dogs eat things, right? So like, what's the food service? How do you think about connectivity and the food service, right? And the relationship that goes there. And then, above that, like what are the services like grooming, walking, right? So companies haven't really evolved to thinking about, that sometimes they get stuck at the hardware level, right? Or maybe they evolve to the consumable level, right? Like the HVAC system example with a filter, it's a great example. There's a system and then there's a consumable, right? And there's a service, right? So you take those three aspects of how you think about an IoT device naturally and think about what the way it evolves into what service exists with it. Not everything has a service associated. The example I use in my industry is, retail front entry systems now have powered entry doors where you walk up and electromechanically those doors just open, right? If you look at the players in that industry, they went completely vertical. The service organization that comes in and services that door is the organization that put that door in, right? There are a couple of leaders now in the world around that. So you look at the model before that, there were those spindle doors, right? I think Rob used to just spin around in them all the time, like when he was a kid. But then it evolved to this new door system, right? And the door system itself actually was powered. There's data attributes, right? There's consumables about it, about how it activates. And there's a service technician that comes in and does that on a regular basis, right? That model exists in a whole bunch of places, even in places where it didn't exist before. And I think that's, Scott, what you're talking about is as we create these business systems, we're moving towards the opportunity to actually help, kind of take away a lot of the headache and heartache from people as they interact with these things on a regular basis. If the overall, the whole package works together, right? But you kind of have to be thinking about the package when you set it up, right? You throw a connected device at a person, they're kind of stuck, right? They're like, well, how do I deal with this, right? A refrigerator is probably another great example. Like you make a connected refrigerator, but doesn't touch the consumables of the food in a logical way, then you're kind of stuck with a connected refrigerator. It doesn't do much, right? Let alone, what the service attribute of that looks like later. So, there's some real novel innovation and creativity has to come out of that. But I think when you take those three tiers to the model, what you can do is apply that in a whole bunch of different things around the house and say, where do those three things come to play? How mature is the industry in that process? And then, how do you make that a mature model as you go to implement it in the marketplace, or at least test it? So that's at least the framework that I use when I think about these things.
I think that's a really interesting series of comments, because when you look at our space right now, it's a mix of product companies that sell products, but also have learned how to be good IoT ecosystem partners. And then you have people who are more mature in their thinking, and they're trying to develop and deploy solutions. And so the first, barriers to success were to get all the, IoT ecosystem partners on common standards and to be able to communicate, via API or whatever, it may be to common standards to communicate well together. Now what we're going to see is a heightened level of functionality and better stuff. We'll get that done. And the next area of conflict and opportunity, where we're going to see a lot more innovations and winners and losers, is going to be exactly what Cory described, which is in the solution space, where some people overreach, other people may underreach, and there'll be more pull and demand from consumers for them to do more. But I think that's what's really exciting about the space right now, is people are really starting to think through, what's our solution? We're a solid ecosystem partner. And I can tell you, from just speaking from like the Schlage side of things, we're trying to be absolutely the easiest to work with. We always call it kind of the partner of choice, right? Hey, if you want to work with, these types of systems, you shouldn't have to change your door lock in order for it to work with that. However, if, my father happens to want to buy a Schlage product, but he doesn't have a fully built out, series of homes, he still wants a certain level of access control within a single family home. And we need to be able to provide that. So I think it's going to be very exciting, and at the same time, I think it'll be somewhat frothy and maybe a little bit confusing, but at a different level rather than just the simple interoperability.
Wonderful. Well, gentlemen, that puts us at 3 o'clock as a hard stop that we had on everything. So really appreciate you answering everything. There was some Q&A and some others in the chat that we didn't get to. So if you guys want to answer those, welcome to do it. And I know the folks at Radicle will have it all captured. So Stu, do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Cory. Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Dave, for hosting this conversation. We will post this recording. We'll share it with the attendees and the registrants. We'll share it with you all. I have recorded some of the questions that weren't answered, and so maybe we can create an opportunity for you to answer those, and we can share them with the group. I guess last question for you all: if people want to reach you, where is it best to find each of you?
Yeah, so Scott Harkins, the easiest is probably just on LinkedIn or via my email, scott.harkins@residio.com.
Yeah, I'm Sorice at Masonite.com, and same as Scott, I'm also on LinkedIn.
Be repetitive here. So LinkedIn, Rob Martens, robert.martens@allegion.com, or on Twitter, I'm Schleg Futurist.
Awesome.
You want to give your Peloton handle there, Rob?
Chunky domination on Peloton. Bring it.
There we go. All right. With that, thank you all again, and thank you all for attending. And I look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on corporate venturing in June. Have a great day.
Have a great one,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Hey, take care.